John 4:52. Interrogabat ergo horam ab eis, inqua melius habuerit, et dixerunt ei, quia heri hora septima reliquit eum febris. So he was asking the hour from them in which he, that is his son, was doing better. And they said to him that yesterday at the 7th hour, the fever left him. There's a few interesting things to discuss in this verse as we continue with the story of the Regulus, whose son Jesus has healed from a distance. He's just had these servants or slaves run up to him and tell him that his son had recovered. And so now, in the imperfect tense, third person singular, imperfect active, indicative here. Therefore, so because of what we've just heard, because of what the servants have told him, he now was asking the hour, that is, he was asking about the hour, he was asking to be told the hour, the precise hour. And this is a little bit delayed here, ab eis. Ab eis we have to take with interrogabat, that is, he was asking from them, he was asking of them, he was seeking to know from them. Really, again, not really necessary, sort of a redundant expression, but there it is. He was asking, because he heard this, for the hour in which, and then here we get an interesting idiom, melius habuerit. There's a couple of interesting things to say here. First of all, we have to note that this is an idiomatic use of habere. Normally, of course, this means just to have or to hold, but it can have lots of different shades of additional meaning depending on the context. Frequently, we see it in the expression se habere, to hold oneself in a certain state. That is more or less to be. It's almost an equivalent of esse. For instance, if you're greeting someone, you might say, quo modo te habes hodie, literally, how do you hold yourself today? But more idiomatically, how are you doing? What kind of condition are you in? That's what we ask one another when we meet one another in order to be polite. And the Romans did the same thing in Latin. Now, we don't have this pronoun here in this example, but it's sort of a similar use. The father was asking in what hour his son began to be better. Something like that. Now, here is the comparative degree of our adverb, ultimately from the positive form, bene, well, melius, better, optime, best. Remember, this is an irregular adverb, just like the corresponding set of adjectives is irregular, bonus, melior or melius, and optimus. So too with the adverb. So he wanted to know in what hour he started to feel better. And one thing we just might note in passing here is that it seems that we have a perfect subjunctive here, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It seems to violate the typical sequence of tenses that was usually observed by Latin authors in most periods. We do see that, not uncommonly, however, in the Vulgate, the sequence of tenses is not always scrupulously observed. We would expect, and of course our friend Erasmus can't help but point this out in his commentary on this verse. He says, what we would have expected is habuisset, pluperfect subjunctive, after a past tense or historical sequence main verb indicating time before, because the father's asking, he wants to know in what hour had the son started to feel better before the time of his asking, which is also in the past, denoted by interrogabat. So, sequence of tenses doesn't seem to be applying here, which again is not terribly unusual, but it is worth noting. But why do we have the subjunctive in the first place? Because an indirect question is introduced by in qua. Remember, when we ask a question directly, we use the indicative. What time is it? But if we are asking a question in reported speech, that is to say, my father asked what time it was, in the Latin version of that sentence, our second verb has to go in the subjunctive. The verb in the dependent clause needs to go in the subjunctive. So that's why we have the subjunctive at all here. Really, it should be the pluperfect subjunctive, but it is what it is. So, moving on quickly. And they said to him, that is the servi, the servants, that yesterday, heri, what's the opposite of yesterday? Can you remember? Kras. Tomorrow, yesterday. These are both useful words. Yesterday, and this is an ablative of time at which, yesterday at the 7th hour, the fever, febris, you can always remember this by thinking of Februarius, the Latin version of the name of our month, February. Fever month, literally, is what it means. Month when it's common for people to get sick. Febris, the fever, reliquit eum, the fever left him.